Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today. This is our second session of the Learning from Leaders webinar series from the Yale Center for Customer Insights, featuring leaders in academia and industry across marketing functions. I'm going to be popping into the chat the sign up for the YCCI newsletter so you can stay updated on upcoming programming and events. Our speaker today is PepsiCo's Chief Consumer Insights and Analytics Officer, Stephan Gans. Prior to joining Pepsi, Stephan has held both brand management and leadership roles across Europe and the US, spearheading teams at Interbrand, Unilever, and the global marketing consultancy Effective Brands. Stephan is a longtime friend of the YCCI, and we're very excited to have him here today to discuss his work at PepsiCo, reinventing the insights function to better serve customer-centric decision-making. Please use the question and answer function to share your questions throughout the presentation. We'll leave about 15 minutes for answering those at the end of the session. Stephan, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Emily. Good afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you are. Thanks for joining. I intend to speak for about half an hour, so we should have ample time for questions as per Emily's plan. I plan to talk about the way we are reimagining consumer insights in PepsiCo. To Emily's point, I lead the consumer insights function at PepsiCo. So there is and that is, think about that function as a community of roughly 600, I think now, people all over the world. So, reimagining consumer insights at PepsiCo. Well, I'm going to just breeze through this. I assume everybody knows PepsiCo, right? We're one of the biggest food and beverages companies in the world. Over 20 brands that are bigger than $1 billion in consumer sales. So a big portfolio of big brands active in roughly 200 countries around the world. And PepsiCo is in the business of convenient foods and beverages, right? And so our mission is, as we like to say, to create more smiles with every sip and every bite. And the way we aim to deliver on that is to be faster, stronger, and better at the way we run our business. Faster in the marketplace, stronger in terms of our capabilities, better in terms of our purpose and sustainability initiatives. So that is just a little tee up for the company PepsiCo. Now, if I look at the let's say the challenge or the context in which we are reimagining the insights function in PepsiCo, it's really threefold. And of course, every talk from any practitioner that you probably ever hear will start with some version of the rate of change has never been this big before, right? And so I really don't intend to echo that necessarily, but I do think at the same time, it's important to start with the fact that consumer needs are changing quite significantly, and obviously the global pandemic has accelerated a whole number of changes that were already brewing under the surface. Not only when it comes to consumer needs and consumer behavior, but also, and these are overlapping, of course, in terms of the channels that we use to reach consumers, whether it is channels to sell our products and services, or channels by which we reach our consumers through media. Right? And then there's, of course, the changing marketplace with ever lower barriers to entry, more emphasis, and rightfully so, on sustainability by the day, and then the changing media and data landscape. So a ton of change from different dimensions that necessitates for the consumer insights function to do whatever it can to indeed get faster, stronger, and better. Faster as in more predictive, more iterative in ways of working, and less sequential, right? Stronger as in more precise and de-averaged. Stronger as in being more clearly end-to-end in the value that we add to the business. And better in being better understanding of what drives consumer behavior, better in blending the big data driven insights with empathy driven insights, and better connected with the everyday life of our consumers. Now, if those are the challenges, then I think the best summary that I can give you of the strategy that we're following as a function is this one, right? I talk about it as the digitalization of our global insights function. So what we are doing as a team is we're building a collaborative, connected community of talent that is leveraging technology to build world-class capabilities to help propel our business forward and deliver world-class insights with impact. Now, as a final piece of context, before I dive into specific examples, when I talk about the collaborative, connected community, that is very important, because in a large matrixed global company like PepsiCo, the function that I lead is actually, it's better to describe it as a family, I think, than as a function, because of those roughly 600 people that work in consumer insights in PepsiCo, there are about 100, maybe 150 that actually report to me. The vast majority of people are embedded as insights professionals in category teams, brand teams, business teams all over the planet, across foods and beverages categories and across different markets, etc., and regions, of course. So what this chart is just showing is how, through this program of digitalization in the past 4 years, we have step by step worked to bring a fairly loose group of different teams that were more or less all over the place in 2016 and earlier, how we are driving convergence in that group to become a much better leveraged source of competitive advantage for PepsiCo. And each of the components of what I'm about to talk about, each of those components of that digitalization strategy is playing a crucial part here, right? So as you can see, from 2016, we moved to 2017 to start with, basically we started the Global Insights Council, which is the global leadership team that actually leads the function. That was new 4 years ago. With that team, we defined what our global capability priorities are, and we started centers of excellence around that that really serve the businesses globally with core capabilities. One of those capabilities turned into AIDA, our digital platform that I'll talk about a bit later, and that digital platform is driving scale and uniformity in ways of working significantly across the function and across the PepsiCo business. Uniformity in ways of working. And we all know, of course, that there's no such thing as a global consumer, thankfully. So it's really about the how that we're driving uniformity in, not the content of the work, right? So the content of the work is as local as it gets. The tools that people use, how people do their work, that is where we drive leverage of scale. So again, this is our overall insights digitalization strategy. And one by one, I want to tackle each of these three green components of this strategy, starting with technology. So I already mentioned just now the name of our global platform. Our global digital consumer insights platform is named AIDA. That is, by the way, not an acronym, but an actual name. And AIDA is a platform that we've started to build now 3 years ago. But we started to build it really with a very clear vision, because we wanted to build for insights, what Google is to search, Oracle is to finance, or SAP is to operations. That is not a small ambition, I can tell you, and it's not easy to get there. But the vision of building one insights way of working, one set of core capabilities that we believe constitute a critical competitive advantage for PepsiCo, and that can help us drive one version of the truth on what great advertising looks like, or what a promising innovation concept looks like. That, I think, is the key to leveraging our scale as a function in PepsiCo. And just to give you a little bit of more detail of what that platform does, there's really three key areas where the AIDA platform, as part of the overall digitalization, really helps the business. And the first area is in the space of innovation. So tools that help with identifying and optimizing all types of business opportunities with speed and agility, right? So we have built a suite of tools with our technology partner, Zappi, that we partnered with now 3 years ago. And so we build a suite of tools that are bespoke for PepsiCo to identify promising concepts, flavors, claims, feature prioritization, and full-blown concept testing. So in the space of innovation, we now have a toolbox that lives on AIDA that insights professionals from around the world in PepsiCo work with. We've done the same for advertising. So whether it is TV advertising or digital advertising, we have developed a set of tools that just simply do a much better job at identifying what great and effective advertising for our brands in our markets looks like. A much better job than any similar tool that is available out there in the marketplace. Now, of course, if you build your own tools, that's a lot of work. And again, here's where the partnership with Zappi comes in, because what they provide to us is the technology, the platform, and the coding skills we don't have in-house. It's a lot of work to build your own tools, but the payoff can be very significant if you do it well. You can imagine that if you're building an advertising testing tool, and you have, like we do, full access to the actual in-market performance of brands around the time that you advertise, you can build a tool that based on that end-to-end connectivity between the actual advertising and the data around sales. You can build a tool over time that has much better predicting value than any generic tool out there. So we now have built advertising tools that can really tell us with a very high level of accuracy whether an ad is going to drive sales or not. The third area in which the AIDA platform is of significant contribution, makes a significant contribution to the PepsiCo business, is in the knowledge management area. That part of the platform we call AskAda. So the platform now actually connects all those hundreds of insights people across the globe, not only in the space of innovation and advertising, but for every piece of work that happens. So that every time we do a concept test, an ad test, or any type of research in any market, PepsiCo as a whole gets smarter. So that is a little bit about the technology angle and the way in which we are leveraging technology to drive, basically to drive competitive advantage in the space of consumer insights for PepsiCo. Now, these are not the only tools that insights leaders in PepsiCo use, right? There's another complementary set of capabilities that we refer to now as one toolkit that is called 360 Always On, right? And 360 Always On is really a toolkit that consists of 6 different capabilities. Capabilities that in some cases really leverage social listening data combined with AI. in some other capabilities, really develop and leverage human empathy to complement that data-driven way of looking at what's happening out there in the world. And then there's Brent Mindshare, which is our own bespoke tool that we've developed with Kantar specifically for use in PepsiCo, that really looks at the health of our brands across the globe. So this toolkit of 6 different specific capabilities is, each of these tools is developed in close partnership with an external partner. So for example, the social listening tool we are developing with Discover AI. Category trends and prediction is a very tight partnership with Black Swan Data, and so on. So we're really making the most of these partnerships with highly specialized companies that deliver a very specific skill that because of our partnership, we can fully leverage for use in our categories and hence turn to use. And the way we use these specific capabilities is roughly in 4 different ways, right? And so keep in mind, even though there's some 6 different capabilities in here, this is really one coherent toolbox. And we bring this one coherent toolbox to the different markets in the world as the global insights capability team in the area of strategic planning, innovation, brand building, and in our winning with customers strategy. So, and I just want to give a brief example of each of these 4 impact areas that this toolbox is actually touching. To start with strategic planning. Imagine the Mexican savory business, so our snacks business in Mexico, which is a very important business for PepsiCo, facing the impact of the COVID pandemic in their market. And the team that was preparing for the beginning of a business planning cycle for the next 3+ years, the team worked with my global team to figure out how the COVID disruption was impacting the category in Mexico on that 3-year horizon. So using that toolkit to really start with the cultural insights, how people's lives have changed due to COVID-19, and translating those cultural insights to behavioral insights. What then is the impact of those changes and those evolving beliefs on the way people buy and consume eating food and drinks? Underlying that, understanding what benefits people are looking for and what the benefit territories are that are most likely to grow, that collectively leads to the definition of opportunity spaces that we can develop jointly between the global team and the Mexican team in this particular example. Using that highly standardized and globally leveraged toolkit means that we can work very fast, very cost efficient, and we can actually do this in-house. So we don't have to tell the Mexican team to find external consultancy because we don't need it. Right? That's one example where this always on set of tools is helping our business. Another example in innovation is, and many businesses have been asking themselves, what does immunity mean for our business, right? How can we scope what the opportunity of immunity in our, in this case, beverage business is, and how do we get a handle of the potential for that for our brands, right? So taking 6 different angles through ingredients predictions, specific recipe analytics, right? So we work with TasteWise, which is a company that does nothing but just looking at every published menu for any restaurant or any published recipe from anybody online, looking for cues, in this case, around immunity, right? And what do we find? What in what context are specific ingredients consumed? What are the benefits people are looking for, etc. What does social listening tell us specifically around immunity? And from that social listening, what can we say about the prediction of the size of the opportunity? That has led to concept development, and that has led to innovation ideas that many of them are now either in markets or have been evaluated for launch later on. And one of the key tools that I just touched on is from that partnership with Black Swan is a tool we call Transcope, right? That is really looking at all the data from Twitter users, blog sources, message boards, review sites, and so on. And that can really help us make very accurate predictions about which ingredients or which benefits, for example, are here to stay. Now, this is, as an example of a tool, this is a software as a service, right? So this is not something that just sits in global HQ and that you have to call somebody to get access to it. We have roughly 200 licenses of this software now across the insights teams in PepsiCo. So people have access to this, they have the data at their fingertips, and then can play and explore with this as much as they want. So that's an example for using the toolkit for innovation. Here's an example of brand building, right? So I think we are all, or at some point have all been privy to advertising briefs that are sent to our agencies that talk about target audiences like realistic optimists, right? And I think everybody who has worked at an agency will recognize the predicament of figuring out what that actually means. So you can use this toolkit to really give a lot more depth to what that target audience really looks like, what they talk like, what the context is in which they consume our products, etc. So, for example, what cultural tensions are most relevant to the Tropicana brand, right? And what daily tensions and challenges is our target audience facing? What do people like dislike? What are their passion points? What do they talk about online, in other words? So giving real meaning and depth to an advertising brief without exception leads to better advertising and more effective communication for our brands. So this is an example of where the toolkit really helps deliver a higher quality and more effective marketing. And finally, here's a great example of how this toolkit gets used across PepsiCo in our winning with customers efforts, right? This is an example of how we use the toolkit to strengthen our partnership with McDonald's by identifying the latest developments in breakfast trends as a result of the pandemic, right? So how because of the pandemic and the shifting motivations and also behavior of people when it comes to breakfast, what are those rising motivations, right? What diets, what recipes, what recipes, and what benefits are now trending? What are people talking about? And are there specific ingredients that are used a lot more at the onset of COVID than in the past? And so, in other words, what does a healthy breakfast look like? Oh, sorry, that was my phone. So, in other words, what does a healthy breakfast look like for consumers, right? And there's an example here on the page. So, 4 examples of how these world-class capabilities help the PepsiCo businesses across the globe. But also, and you've probably heard me talk about that between the lines, 4 examples of how my global insights team is able to leverage these capabilities to help out the local insights teams in our businesses, all the while knowing that for some of the areas, some of the core areas of consumer insights work, innovation testing and advertising testing, we all rely on AIDA as the platform where the testing gets done and where the results are always available through the knowledge management platform. Now, with all this in mind, right, with the way we work in mind, the global leverage of capabilities and the global leverage of technology to make sure that we drive our scale and deliver against what I like to call the global might for the local fight in our function in PepsiCo. What does it mean for the type of people that we employ and develop in the insights function in PepsiCo? Just briefly about that, two slides only. We all, no, probably not all, but depending on your age, many of us have grown up in a world where there was quite a clear distinction between quantitative and qualitative research, right? And I made the early 15 years, or the first 15 years of my career, where I was a marketeer at another CPG company, and this is how we thought. Some issues are best resolved through qual research, some through quant, and sequentially through a mix of these types of tools, you would get to an answer that was useful. And that is not that sequential way of working with that distinction between qual and quant is of the past, clearly, right? I mean, everything is quant today, and the key to really deep, meaningful insights is to bring the qual perspective into all that quant in as many occasions as possible. So the type of people that we look like, I like to describe them as human scientists, people that are really able to combine the objective with the subjective, who are very comfortable with big data and analytics driven thinking, but who are equally comfortable and curious with and about observing consumer behavior and translating that to understanding of why people do what to do. Because let's not forget, 9 out of 10 times, data does a really great job in describing who does what, when, where, with whom, what time, and what exactly is consumed. But why all of that happens is typically quite elusive for the data, right? Why all that happens is something that you need empathy and curiosity for, and that you need to bring as a complement to what the data tells you. So the what and the why. Hence, data and behavioral science, right? It's no coincidence that I'm partnering with the Yale team specifically on behavioral science and really building that capability or set of capabilities further in my team as well. And finally, algorithms and stories, right? So it's when you work with marketing teams and business teams across PepsiCo, right? It's incredibly powerful to have an algorithm predicting a certain effectiveness of an ad, but really understanding why the algorithm says what it says and being able to talk about that in a convincing way as an insights professional is as important to be seen ultimately as that reliable business partner that the business needs. So that's really it in terms of slides for me. I hope we can have a discussion, and I'm looking forward to your questions. So Emily, over to you.
Yes. So we do have some questions coming in the Q&A. So we are going to start with one from Kara from Eversource. So she has asked, can you recommend some incremental steps for those of us that have less developed organizations and toolkits?
Yeah, I'm reading the answer. I'm reading the question right now. Thanks, Kara, and you'll be happy to hear that I'm actually a customer of Eversource. So, because you're asking 2 or 3 questions in one, right? What are incremental steps for those of us who have less developed organizations and toolkits, but also how can we demonstrate value in the short term? So I think, and so what you're touching on are also some of the basic tenets of driving change management, right? There is, I think when I think back about how we started our journey to 4 years ago when I joined the company in this role, we really started out with getting that group of insights leaders together and decide on what our global capability priorities were. And just by doing that, and also taking the time to do that, we really created a joint agenda. And you can do that with the insights function, but of course, ideally, you do that with the insights function and with the let's say, your internal customers at the same time. So at the end of, let's say, the first year, what we had was a joint agenda that we landed on as a function, but also a joint in terms of acknowledged by the business as these were the most important things to tackle. And then we started tackling them one by one. I realized that when I talk now 4 years into this journey, it all sounds like a lot and hopefully interesting, and to some of you maybe even impressive in terms of the change that we've been able to drive. But this started really small, right? AIDA started with one product, which was a concept test that we thought, was much better developed ourselves with our partner at the time, Zappi, because we didn't like the concept tests that were for sale out there. And it started small, and that garnered a lot of enthusiasm. And so from that, we organically grew AIDA, right? So I think, like with, and then I get to change, like with all these things, it's very smart typically to start small and show the impact and show that you can do a great job at being able to develop a more predictive concept test, for example, and then grow it from there. I'll go to the next question myself, Emily. I think, Kara, I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if you have anything that you want to follow up on with me. There's a question of Stan. Hi, Stan. It's great to see that you've joined. How's the adoption driven in a federated structure that you seem to have at PepsiCo? Yeah, great question, Stan. And that is also a fundamental difference in setup. That federated structure versus the function in the way that you are running it or ran it at Unilever. And the best way I can describe it is through the cliche of the carrot and the stick, right? So driving adoption is, first of all, it's a significant part of my day job. And so I spend a lot of time, or I have spent a lot of time over the last years encouraging adoption. And encouraging adoption looks, when you think about carrot and stick, the carrot part of that is simply in the fact that the tools are better, faster, and cheaper than anything out there. And the stick can be that I would make sure to build relationships with my key customers, the CMOs in the businesses across the globe, the global brand leaders, global category leaders, fellow global functional leaders. And I would make sure that they completely sign on with the vision and that they see the benefit of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Take, for example, the rationale of building our own bespoke global advertising testing tool. A key benefit of doing that ourselves is that, of course, we have all the data in-house and we can consistently do meta learning from our advertising, not only from our TV advertising, but also from our digital advertising. And so we are constantly figuring out what is working best in a certain category or subcategory in a certain part of the world based on the thousands of ads or or hundreds of concepts that are being developed in a certain time period in a part of the world. And that is a value add that businesses so far have not been used to. People have not been spoiled, to put it mildly, with that type of meta insight from external vendors, in at least my experience. Also because they were not trained to ask for it. So carrot and stick, I think, is the short answer. And this is actually a topic I really like to talk about. So take me up on that if you want to talk about it more. I'd love to. Emily, you want me to keep going and go to Sarah?
I think Sarah has an interesting question, but I'm happy as we get more, I'm happy to kind of pick out the ones that might work as we go through.
Sure.
So Sarah, of course, asks, can you speak more about your approach to infusing behavioral science into the organization? And do you have a dedicated team focused on this space?
So that's a great question, Sarah. So we, first of all, we don't have a dedicated team focused on this space. We, as part of the 360 Always On capability team, we have a number of people who are very focused on driving behavioral science understanding and capabilities in different parts of our businesses. Now, this is also an area where we leverage the Yale team extensively, right? So that can be, and leveraging behavioral science comes in many shapes and forms. It comes with helping, for example, our beverage business by making sure that we do whatever we can to encourage customers or to encourage consumers who are making a choice from a soda fountain to make a healthy choice, right? So the order in which you, let's say the sequence of the options, the colors that you use, the way you operate the machine, there's a lot of behavioral science that goes into that. But we also use it externally. We also use it internally. We're currently rolling out the AskAda knowledge management platform across more and more markets every week at the moment. Now, I think all of you will agree that the challenge with building a knowledge management platform is not in the technology, it's not in getting the content on there, it's not in convincing people it makes sense to do it. It's in driving the behavior change that comes, that is required for people to actually start using it and for people to actually stop sending each other 50,000 megabytes a month via email, but instead making sure that everybody works in public, saves their files on AskAda, and so that everybody can actually benefit from the work. We are working with Ravi and the team to deploy behavioral science to our own teams as well, to really help nudge people into that behavior. So there's a number of people that have quite extensive experience with infusing behavioral science in the global team, and increasingly also in some of our bigger business units. But it's a topic or it's a capability area where there's just a lot more opportunity for our business, especially because our business is so day-to-day, right? The products we sell are very day-to-day and very much ingrained in people's lives.
Great, thank you, Stephan. Our next question is about how you approach copy testing. So this person mentioned that you said that you've gotten to a place of being highly predictive of whether an ad will drive sales, and they were interested more around the tools that you use.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that, but that is a long and technical conversation. What I would suggest is that if you're really interested in the tool, probably the best thing to do is to connect with Zappy, because what we've done is we've jointly developed the tools with our tech partner to be completely developed in the way and designed in the way that we want it, right? part of our agreement with Zappi is that they are able to sell those tools also to non-competing companies. So as long as you don't work with a certain beverage manufacturer from one of the southern states in the United States, and there's a lot of red in your logo, you're most welcome to use the tool. And I would get in touch with Zappi about it.
Great. So the next question is, what has been the biggest challenge in moving the Insights team along this journey, and or incorporating AIDA or the digital platform within the organization and Insights team?
Well, back to the question that Stan asked, and Stan and I have talked about this in the past as well. I think the biggest challenge is like with most things in life. It's not the biggest challenge is not about getting to the right answer. It's not about getting to the right tool, even though all of that is challenging. The biggest challenge is is making sure that people actually use it. Making sure that people actually change their behavior and start using it at scale. Because this is in a company like PepsiCo where local sufficiency is a crucial part of the culture. This touches upon that, right? Leveraging scale across the globe, driving that what I refer to as global might for the local fight. That is still a bit countercultural to PepsiCo. PepsiCo has grown over the years very successfully and is very successful in its markets in important part due to its phenomenal focus on excellent local execution and local entrepreneurship. So if you come in there as a global leader and you're going to shout from the rooftops that you're now going to standardize the way we work, that is obviously a bad idea, right? So the biggest challenge is in making sure that while creating that leverage and while at the end of the day standardizing the way we work, indeed, we do that in a way that is completely respectful of that culture and that delivers short-term benefits that people can actually, put their hands on for their local businesses. And I dare say we've been able to do a great job at that, at speed, also because we've chosen our partnerships well.
Great, thank you. I think on the topic of challenges, we have a question about how the last year, if it's accelerated your transformation, if so, any learnings or anything that you might have done differently.
I think it has accelerated the transformation in some ways, yes. I mean, of course, I don't have to elaborate that much on how horrible the last year has been in so many different ways for so many different people. What it has enabled in our work is probably even more focus. And what it has helped us do, I mean, if something like a pandemic happens, then suddenly it's clear to everybody in the company that consumer-centric ways of thinking and working are incredibly important, right? There's no discussion about the fact that COVID has had a huge impact on consumer behavior, which has had a huge impact on our business. So the moment the pandemic started, every business leader in PepsiCo was wondering where this is going. Short term, in terms of societal measures like closures of businesses and channels and what have you, but also mid to longer term on what staying at home for billions of people around the world suddenly meant for their food and beverage consumption, and what it meant for those other billions of people that weren't able to work from home, what it meant to what their sense of security and concerns around safety and health what that meant for their food and beverage consumption. And so it has certainly accelerated the, let's say, the role of my collective function in helping the company become more consumer centric. And we've developed ways of working for that. But there's also, I think, for a lot of businesses and a lot of leaders, a real shift in the way they look at the outside world and the place of the business in that.
Excellent. I think we have time for one more question. And this is about building out the AIDA tool and kind of the approach you took in building out the tool. If you used one complete use case and rolling that out to the team, because we have some people that are in the process of rolling out similar tools, and it just feels like a big thing to tackle all at once.
Yeah, I think I alluded to this earlier when I said, look, AIDA started with a tool, right? And right now it's 6 tools and by the end of this year it will be 9 tools. But we didn't start with 9 tools. We didn't even start with the promise of 9 tools. We started with a dream, but that dream that I shared earlier, right? When I had that one slide up that says, can we be to insights what, say, Google is to search? That was really a dream among a couple of, let's say, people in my team. So it is a step-by-step approach, but it does. There's this tipping point, or there's multiple tipping points in which you feel that there's a sense of critical mass, that something like AIDA really becomes just the default place to go to, right? And that the global capabilities team that is responsible for 360 always on is the first go-to place for a team like the Mexican savory category team, right? They'll check in with this team if they have a strategic challenge and figure out together how they can wrestle that challenge to the ground, instead of let's say picking up the phone and calling somebody from the BCG, right? So I like to think that, I sense that in some parts of our business, we've started to reach this tipping point, and we've simply become more self-sufficient. And I think the self-sufficiency, and by the way, in the context of all the partnerships that I talked about, self-sufficiency for me doesn't mean that we do everything ourselves, but it means for me that we are very choiceful about those things that constitute a competitive advantage for PepsiCo, and that we really want to be world-class at ourselves. And what these tools do is they enable us to focus on those things that really matter for the business.
Great. Well, on that note, Stephan, thank you so much for joining us today. I know all of our attendees feel the same. If you could share your note of gratitude to Stephan in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated. And we've also shared the YCCI's mailing list if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on everything that we have going on. Please see the thanks rolling in the chat and with raised hands. So Stephan, again, thank you very much.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks all. And please do get in touch if you want to talk more or have further questions.